USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veterans' stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
I was born on that night of October 30, 1929, which was the worst night of the stock market crash. We lived in Brooklyn in a two-story house with two families, and when I was 4 and a half, we came out to Hempstead, New York, which was a beautiful old colonial town, and we lived right near the golf course where we played in the winter. And we played by the time we were old enough, and Finland was being invaded by the Russians, and the Finns had ski troops, and we would go over there and we'd get our old sheets from our mothers and we'd pretend we were Finnish soldiers fighting the Russians out in the snow on the golf course. When I was in high school, we had the draft. But what I did, I went to the Citadel. I was ranked in the class number 33, and I was promoted to platoon sergeant for the junior year, but I left. And I went to Norwich University. Had I stayed at the Citadel, I wanted Air Force. I wanted to fly. But Norwich, it was armor. So I was a tank officer in Korea. Well, it started on June 25th, 1950. And we had already arranged our wedding, and then we figured, well, it'll be over by the time I have another year of college to go. But it wasn't, unfortunately. So I got activated at Fort Riley, Kansas, out in the middle of nowhere. The flattest ground you ever saw, but they had a flood. So here I arrived, as a lieutenant with a pregnant wife down in Fort Riley. No quarters. One bridge was washed out to the post. And then my first job at Fort Riley was every night I was put on guard on another bridge, and I was supposed to call the post guard that night if we saw a tree or something floating down the river which might have knocked that bridge down. Now, why would you stand on a bridge and watch something come down and knock you down? You should have been off to the side. We had spotlights on the river, but Fort Riley was something. Then we went to Fort Knox, the armor class school.
Mobile, rugged, and strong, a rolling mass of destruction, armor churns its inexorable way through the heart of the enemy's defenses, grinding toward the ultimate objective, triumph on the battlefield.
When that was over, you got your orders. And we started opening our orders. Now, I'm the only guy who's got a wife. I go to Korea.
The prolonged, bitter fighting in Korea has again demonstrated the versatility of armor. Working side by side with the rifleman, the soldier in the tank has written a new chapter in the history of warfare.
I was a replacement, and I arrived with one other guy from Norwich, and he was put in the 25th Division Recon Company, and I was put in one of the tank companies, C Company of the 89th Tank Battalion of the 25th Infantry Division. And the company headquarters is back like 4 miles or so from the front line. They had a front line then, an MLR, main line of resistance, for a year and a half. And so we had dinner, and then we went out and we pitched horseshoes, which are the rings from the artillery shells. And all of a sudden, everybody runs. They disappear. What the hell's going on? And zero, boom, the first artillery shell came in. And I ran to one, there were only 2 tanks left because all the other tanks were up on the front line. So I ran to one tank and I looked in the hatch and they said, no room in here. They had about 10 guys trying to hide in that tank. And then there was one other tank, same thing. So I lay down next to sandbags against a tent. So I'm lying down and on my face in the dirt and the ants, and the shells are coming in and boom, 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 boom. Then it was over. So we all come out, we go back to the table where we had dinner. Guess what? Every plate was shattered, the tent was aired, you could see out of it. It was all shot up. Now how the hell did the enemy know where this was 4 miles back?
And that was your first day?
First night, yes.
Where exactly were you stationed in Korea?
About 5 different places on the front line. The first place was in a valley. The enemy was up on the hill. When we came out of an underground bunker, we had to run, crawl under the tank, and go up through the escape hatch, or you'd get shot if you climbed up on top of the tank. Of course, they're snipers, you're only a couple hundred yards away on the MLR. And we would spend 2-hour watches on the tank. We always had to have 2 guys on the tank so they could shoot it or drive it. And in the winter, they only gave us 3 sleeping bags because you had to have 2 guys there. So when you came off guard duty, you'd get in a sleeping bag that somebody else had to get out of so it's nice and warm. But of course, you live with the rats on the ground. So that was the daily thing, and some days you would have. One day we had 200 rounds fired at artillery fired at my 5 tanks in that valley, and I'm underneath the tank. I didn't even get up into it because I had been firing the machine gun, and I'm sitting there counting the rounds because I got to send in a report. I'm the lieutenant. Every day I got to send in a report how many rounds we got, but we got sniper fire no matter where we were, and mortars all the time, every day. If you went out, 2 guys went out and stood there and started shooting the bull, there would be mortar fire coming out.
And your mission was to protect a position. Your mission was
yes,
okay.
To protect the infantry who occupied that line. So we were on the same line. We didn't have any infantry in front of us, but we had them next to us, and we all, at night, would be in the same trenches. It's so strange because one of the boys that died, he was closer to me than you, but he wasn't one of my boys. He was one of the infantry boys that I was supporting, so I didn't know his name, and the poor guy was a recruit or a new guy, and somebody told him to go to his company headquarters, and he had to go get something done. So I'm walking in the tank track, and of course, when the winter in the mud or whatever. So I'm about that lower than he is. He's walking on the high ground, and I'm used to hearing the mortars come. I know what that. I got good ears, and so boom, I just go down flat, and he was a little slower, and he got a piece right under the helmet right here. And he went to get up, and I said, no, pretend you're dead. And we laid there for quite a while, and so the enemy didn't fire another one. And then he got up, and I said, are you okay? And he said, well, there was a little blood here, just a little, right here. A damn piece of that mortar went right under his helmet, right in here. I said, well, can you walk to the medical thing over there? He said, yeah. And next day I found out he died when they tried to get that piece of steel that went right straight in here. Yeah. And if he were one of my guys, I would have known his name, and I would have written to the family maybe or something like that, but I didn't know him. When we were in that valley, the Mundung-ni Valley, our first position, Sergeant Mustick he was from Jamaica. He did something stupid. He went out with the Army Times. He was off duty, and he was going to the bathroom. And the bathroom was like a double foxhole with a wooden box with a hole cut in it, and you sat down below the level of the ground. But right behind it was a stake with a sign on it that said, "This is zeroed in by enemy fire." Well, I only went at night. I wouldn't go out there in the daytime. He went out there and he's reading the Army Times, and the Russian mortar made in Russia from World War II landed right between his feet. And he's sitting there now with his pants down, looking at this mortar round stuck in the ground, waiting for it to go off, and he starts screaming. Very traumatic incident, waiting for that. And he climbs out of the hole, and he starts to run, and he's screaming. So we go to there were only two other of us in the bunker, and we look out the bunker L door, and here he is trying to run with his pants down. And needless to say, when he came in the bunker, he was he couldn't even talk. And one of the guys said, "I see they've scared the shit out of you." On Christmas Day of 1952, there was not much firing going on. There was only 2 enemy attacks on the whole 150-mile front line, and thank God it wasn't us. And but there was a loudspeaker talking to us at night, and so on. So you have to listen to that. This is the voice of peace. We have girls over here, and we'll take care of you, and you'll be able to go home and see your loved ones, and blah blah blah. And I fired a tank around it. I knocked out the. They'd have to get a new speaker, that's for sure. But that night, when you're on guard duty, you didn't hear their chatter, so we missed it. Well, in 1996, I broke my shoulder skiing. It was a 6 months recuperation where it was very painful, and I couldn't sleep in bed. I had to sit in a chair and so on. And I started reading, and I read a book that it was about World War I. A guy who lived in the trenches was an officer, and he left it for the family, and the family never had it published because it was wartime when they got all the information when he wrote it and so on. So anyway, I said, I'm going to write. It took me from 96 to 2002 to publish it. Former U.S. Army tank platoon leader shares Korean War experience through recollections, photos, maps, unit command reports, history books, and personal letters to and from his wife. Right. That's what it is. Well, it's the forgotten wars. That was why I did that. And there's a picture in here of a tank on Heartbreak Ridge, the northernmost hill, 850. And I took that over as a new lieutenant the day after the mortar killed 3 guys on that tank and wounded the other 2 because they were loading ammunition in daylight because they had a stupid lieutenant. When we weren't on the tank, on duty, we slept in the bunker or we read. We could run a wire from electric from the tank, so we had electricity all the time. And then one day I was on the back of the tank, and one of the guys ran out and said, "Hey, Lieutenant, what happened?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The light went off." The enemy sniper, I was in the turret, and the enemy sniper hit 6 inches down from my hip, and it cut the wire. Actually cut the wire to the guys who were in there reading. 6 inches higher, and I couldn't be walking today. I'd be limping. When we came home, I came home on a troop ship, and by the way, they shouldn't fly a guy home the next day from combat. The boat took 17 days, and by the time you get to San Francisco, you're pretty well forgotten what was going on. You'd hear a few guys screaming at night once in a while, but most of them, that 17-day voyage was very healthy mentally. We came home in uniform, of course, and when I got out in San Francisco, I was the only guy walking around in uniform. But there was nothing, no sign of the war anywhere. Anywhere. Nobody ever said, thanks for your service. Now, everywhere I go, if I wear a PCAP with the Korean War veteran, and I wear it for that purpose, to find other veterans. But a lot of women, boy, thank you for your service. And then I asked them, well, did you have anybody in the service? Oh yeah, my grandfather was in Korea or something like that. And I get talking to these people. It's nice.